In the last part of this module, we are going to make use of one more API in our site, the geolocation API. The scenario is that we want to show users the route to the physical store from his current location. Now, to find that current location, we'll use the geolocation API built into HTML5. The concept of geolocation is very commonly used nowadays. With devices in our pockets which are constantly connected, we aren't difficult to trace. All these devices and also modern laptops have the ability to figure out where we are through GPS, Wi-Fi or cell phone triangulation. When the device has this capability, it's only a small step for the browser to be able to get this information as well. And when the browser can access this information, this opens up a lot of interesting scenarios for many sites. The retrieved geographical position is normally very accurate. Maybe you've already used Google Maps or some other mapping service, and these services automatically zoom in on your current position. So the browser has in that case done a good job finding your current latitude and longitude. Sometimes the information can also contain information about speed, height, and heading. Many sites love to know where you are currently. This gives them the ability to serve you better. Sites with weather information, traffic information, or maps, for example, all benefit from this information. On the other hand, geographical information is sensitive data. And as a user, you don't always want each site to know where you're currently at. Therefore, whenever a site wants to access this information, the browser will protect you as a user and give you a warning like you see here at the bottom of this slide. This is simply a screenshot of Internet Explorer. Other browsers are doing something similar. In the warning, the name of the site is displayed. This is important so that the user knows if it's the main site or perhaps a banner hosting site which is requesting this information. There is no way for your code to bypass the appearance of this message, which is good news for the user. The user therefore remains in control and, depending on the browser, has the option to hide the information once or always for that particular site. Let's take a look at how the geolocation API works then. The API is available through the window.navigator.geolocation object from our JavaScript code. The most obvious thing that we'll want to do with this API is asking for the current position, which we can do using the getCurrentPosition method. In the sample code here, we are first checking if there's support for geolocation, and if so, we are using the getCurrentPosition method. In the showPosition, so the success callback, we get a position object, which allows us to retrieve the latitude and the longitude. More on the latter in just a second. Next to the getCurrentPosition method, we can also use the watchPosition method. In the sample you see here, we see how we can use the watchPosition. We get the current position and we'll get in new values whenever the user is moving. This is useful when we're interested in updates about the location of the user. When we are no longer interested in receiving updates, we can stop the watch using the clearWatch method. When we want to figure out the user's location, we can use the getCurrentPosition or watchPosition. There is, however, an extra parameter we can pass into both methods. This object is the position options object, and it allows us to configure the way that the geopositioning is done. The object defines a number of properties. The timeout is pretty logical. It says when a new value needs to be retrieved. The enable high accuracy allows us to specify how accurate the position needs to be. In other words, if the browser must try to use the GPS if available. Setting this to true will also mean that the position retrieval will take longer. And finally, the maximum age specifies how old a cached position can be for it to be still accepted. In the sample, we also see how the positions object is passed to the watchPosition method. We've already discussed the success and error callback, but we haven't looked at the position object returned to us in the success callback. This object exposes the coordinates property, which exposes a number of properties which contain all the values for the position information. This object exposes the coordinates property, which exposes a number of properties which contain all the values for the position information. Note that not all values will be filled in all the time. It depends on the device and the situation, of course. We can find this way the latitude, the longitude, the altitude, the accuracy, the speed, and the heading. In the error callback, on the other hand, we'll get information about what went wrong. In this case, we're getting in a position error object. Based on what happened while trying to retrieve the position information, a different error code will be returned to the user, as you can see here in this sample code. It's possible that the user denied accessing the information. It's possible that we can't get the position information, or that we got a timeout while trying to access the information. And based on this value, we can handle things a little bit differently. In the last demo of this module, we are going to add support for the geolocation API in our code. In the last demo of this module, we are going to implement the Find Us page. On the Find Us page, I'm going to show a map of where the physical Joe's Coffee Store is located. And on that map, I'm also going to show how to get there based on your current location. And finally, we'll also add driving directions in plain text. And of course, we'll be using the geolocation API, part of HTML5, and a little bit of the Google Maps API. Let's take a look. I've taken the liberty to already add on the Find Us page a couple of divs. The first div has an ID map, the second div has an ID driving directions, and we'll first focus on the map div. I'm going to add a new script file, and I'm going to call it geopositioning or something. There we go. Now in this JavaScript file, the main function is going to be the create driving directions map function. First, I'm going to check if the current browser has support for geolocation. I'm going to do that by checking if navigator.geolocation basically exists, if this doesn't return null. If this does return null, I'm going to show in the browser an error message saying that there is no support for geolocation. Now we're going to assume that there is support, and if there is support, we're going to use the navigator.geolocation get current position. I'm going to pass in two callback functions on success and on error. I'm going to implement those in just a second. The third parameter is that position options that we saw in the slides. In here, I'm going to try to enable the high accuracy. I'm going to specify that the previous geolocation fix can only be 1000 milliseconds old, and the timeout to wait is 500 milliseconds. In the onSuccess callback, I'm getting in that position object that amongst others exposes the coordinates. I'm going to call in here the show map function, which I'm going to create in just a second. Let's first add the onError callback. Now in the onError callback, I'm going to check which was the current error code. There's several possible options for this. For example, the permission can have been denied to access the location by the user. Or it could be that there is no way to figure out the position. There could have been a timeout, or there could have been some other error. And in all cases, we're going to get the div, so the map div, and we're going to change the inner HTML to specify what the error was. Now the next thing we need to do is implement that show map function, of course. That is going to show the actual map based on our current location. Now the last thing I need to do here is implement my show map function, of course. That accepts the two parameters, the latitude and the longitude. As mentioned, this is going to use the Google Maps API quite a lot. I'm going to show you a couple of things here, but you can read a lot of this in the Google Maps documentation as well. I need, amongst others, a directions service and a directions renderer. Next, I need to specify what is my route. The route has a couple of properties. Origin, which is the current location that I got back from the geolocation API, and I'm going to pass those into a Google Maps let long object. I specify the destination. In this case, I specified that the Joe's Coffee Store is located on the Grand Market of Brussels, which is not too far from where I live. And finally, I also specified that the travel mode is driving. Then I can also create an object that contains a couple of map options. The zoom level, where to center the map, and also what type of map, which is in this case a road map. I want to show driving directions. And then the final thing I have to do here is create the actual map. This is again using the Google Maps API quite a lot. Let's save this now, and let's now go to the Finders page. On this page, I have to add two JavaScript references. One to my own JavaScript file, and a second one that references the Google Maps API. Finally, I have to call my own function in my own script. And I'm going to do that again at the bottom of the page. I'm going to attach an event listener that calls my create driving directions map upon the DOM content loaded event firing. Save all this and see what this gives in the browser. As you can see, the browser is notifying me that this localhost page wants to track my physical location. I'm going to allow that. And there we go. We now see the map appearing, showing my location, as well as driving directions to Joe's Coffee Store, the physical store in Brussels. Now there's one more thing I want to do here. I had that second div here, driving directions. I also want to show as text the driving directions from my current location to Joe's Coffee Store. So in the geopositioning file again, I can use the directions renderer.setPanel, which is actually going to take that div and paste in the driving directions. I'm not going to run this again. You can try it for your own, because otherwise you'll see my address appearing inside of the browser. Let's go back to the slides. We have reached the end of this JavaScript focused module. I think this module added a lot of interesting functionality to our site. Let us quickly review what we have added. We started by adding drag and drop to the shopping cart. Drag and drop is an operation which desktop users have been using for many years. Now with HTML5, adding support for this interaction now comes out of the box. We have then added support for saving the shopping cart locally. For this, we have used the web storage feature, again one of the new JavaScript libraries bundled with HTML5. Finally, we have used the geolocation API to find the location of the user. This was then used to show a map of the current position. So this concludes Module 5, and in Module 6 we are focusing on the more visual side of things. I hope to see you there as well. Bye-bye.